Imagine a place where students use media, creativity, communication, and critical thinking to make stories come to life. A place where authentic audiences are enlightened by the kids who live there. Hawk Media Productions at Kealakahe Intermediate School, located in Kona, Hawaii, is an example of that place where students strive daily for the summit. From school broadcasts, Hiki No stories, community spotlights, and now podcasts, Hawk Media Productions hopes to inspire other schools to get involved in meaningful learning in the community and the world. Believe it or not, all schools have the students, teachers, and community partners to be the spark for what school could be in Hawaii.
Hey everyone, this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. I'm your host, Josh Rapun. Today we're doing another on-the-road episode of this podcast series where we seek out interesting, imaginative, innovative, and creative people in education spaces and capture their stories. Today I will be talking with two lifelong learners affiliated with Hawai'i Kids CAN. A little bit later in the show, I'll be talking to the executive director of this very special advocacy group. Hawai'i Kids CAN advocates for the success of every Hawaii student from pre-K through college and career. They are working hard to improve policy to help all students thrive. Executive Director David Miyashiro and his team are also working to share promising practices and stories to demonstrate that all kids can succeed. Hawai'i Kids CAN has 4 guiding stars, if you will: innovation, multilingualism, options, and excellence. More on these stars a bit later in the show. With me today are Phoenix Valentine. Did I get that pronounced right?
Phoenix Maimiti Valentine.
Valentine, yes. Got it. Okay. And Davin Bunam. Got it. Welcome to this conversation. I know that this idea is pretty goofy in our digital age, but let's say that you're part of a pen pal program. I mean, who does pen pals anymore, right? It's all digital. Where you get connected to someone in, say, Iowa or New York or somewhere else, and you're writing your first letter. I know, we don't write letters anymore. I guess it's going to be an email or it's going to be Facebook Messenger or something like that. And your first paragraph describes yourself. So, Phoenix, what would that first paragraph to your new pen pal say about you?
Hi, new pen pal in Idaho or New York. I'm Phoenix Maimiti Valentine. I'm a Oiwi filmmaker. That means a native filmmaker of Hawaii. And I'm a homeschooler and a lifelong learner.
And what is your kind of sense of like who you are and where you come from?
My sense of who I am is that I am a Kanaka of Moku'a Waianae, the district of Waianae on the west side of Oahu. And I take in my cultural heritage through mo'olelo storytelling or the Hawaiian language. And where I'm going is I'm going to remember all of the things that I've learned and contributed to my filmmaking in the future.
Awesome. So you're a product of place, you're a product of culture.
Yes.
Awesome. David, what is your first paragraph going to say?
Ooh, okay. I just open up with a quick introduction, like, aloha, my name is David, I'm from the island of Oahu. But then I jump a little bit more into like what makes me tick. I'd say something like, my upbringing has always exuded non-traditionalness.
And what does that mean?
Well, ever since I can remember, I've always done things weirdly or just differently. Mm-hmm. Ever since like elementary, intermediate, high school, it's never stopped. Like, I know one time I would do my homework on the ground in my class just because I'd work faster like that. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know why, but my teacher decided to get a couch after that.
You think there might be a connection?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Maybe.
So you were just lying on the floor, and that's where you felt comfortable doing your homework. Yeah.
I just do whatever makes me feel comfortable.
Right, right. And what is your sense of place here in Hawaii? What is your sense of kind of Oahu and where you come from and what this place means to you?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on place?
So, we're talking a lot in education now about place-based learning and culture-based learning. And this is in response to a more traditional way of approaching education that sort of strips out place and culture and actually asks students to amass a bunch of information, and then you have to account for it. Test and paper, that kind of thing. And now we're starting to look more and more at how place and culture influence the learners who are in the classroom. So in what ways does the island of Oahu kind of inform who you are or who you were as a student?
I guess just firstly, I think that place and culture are one of the most important things to like learning and making learning more effective, more innovative, and just like exuding creativity. Personally, to me, I have always aligned myself with ideas of sustainability and just balance, because I feel like those are tied directly to where we're from. We're from Hawaii. We are on an island. So that means that resources are limited and we have to keep things going.
So if you're interested in sustainability, if that's something that is an idea that you want to pursue and know more, how could you not be connected to place and sustain an inquiry, if you will, into sustainability? It's super interesting. And Phoenix, in what ways, specific examples, possibly maybe as a specific example of where place has really informed who you are as a learner?
Well, I feel like Hawaii is a unique place demographically and climately, and our learning here is no different. And when you come from Hawaii, you have different ways of learning, like multi-generational, alongside your kapuna, your makua and your kaikuana or kaikaina, your grandparents, your parents, your younger siblings or older siblings. And you have all of this feedback and perspective from these different generations when you can learn together. And it's sort of just integrated in hand. And I feel like I'm going off topic of what the question was. It wasn't really geared to education, was it?
No, and in fact, I did a on-the-road episode just recently with a guy. His name was Dan Kinzer, and he did a round Oahu walk, 140 miles. And he did it over 2 weeks. And what he was looking for was what he called the genius of place. That he felt like everywhere he went on this island, as he circumnavigated it, he found intelligence everywhere. And it seemed to come up through the soil and up through the people. And that's what you're describing, is that there's kind of a smartness about who you are, where you come from, and your place.
Yeah, in Hawaii I found that there's an alala no eau makahana ka'ike, learn through doing. And that's very active in the students in Hawaii, where if you have a passion, you go out and you actively pursue it.
Right.
And then when you learn something, there's also a kuleana to it, a responsibility, a privilege, and honor that you share it with the next opportune learner.
Right. So I want to jump into your work with Hawai'i Kids CAN, and I want to start by talking about your WAVE program. So WAVE stands for We Are Voices of Excellence, and it emerged as a small pilot at Farrington High School 2 years ago. Today we will be talking about WAVE's second cohort, the first to be statewide, the second to have Teach for America teachers participating in the process. So I'm thinking about examples of student learning by doing, which you just referenced a second ago, through WAVE. So Phoenix, tell us more about WAVE. What's it all about?
Well, WAVE is a student advocacy training program for high schoolers such as myself. They teach us the legislative process and give us outlets to the community or directly to the legislature where we can share our student voice. We meet like roughly once a month and help out in the community and mentor future leaders.
And David, what's your take on WAVE? What if you were to give the 30-second elevator pitch to somebody, across the street from us right now at Whole Foods, and they said, "Oh, what's the WAVE program?" What would you say?
Well, obviously, I think it's important to get out that like there are four main like pillars of multilingualism, education, options, and excellence. But I think one of the big things to push is that it's about options, like highlighting what Phoenix was talking about. Through the WAVE mentors and all the facilitators, they all have like unique experiences and skill sets that help us like connect and meet with different people throughout the community, locally and even globally sometimes.
So Phoenix, what are the ways that the program actually engages you in this idea of learn by doing? Because you're in the legislative process, you're learning that process, you're learning how to work within it. What is the learn by doing process that Hawai'i Kids CAN uses to help you navigate that?
Oh yeah, WAVE has been really awesome in the 2 years that I've known them. They've given me so many opportunities. Like how I actually first met them was being a part of a student-led candidate forum, and where I got to speak on that. And since then, I've been able to go and speak in front of the Board of Education for community board meetings at Nanakuli Public Library, and the Student Youth Summit at the Hawaii State Capitol. I've been on panel and written for testimony for HB 406, one of the many bills that they've introduced to me. It supports student internships in Hawaii. And basically what I'm trying to say is that their learn through doing process is if you have an opinion, they'll find a venue for you to share it with the community or with the legislature on whatever you deem important.
So David, it seems like there are two parts to this as I'm learning about it right here in the moment. Part one is the navigation part, literally the nuts and bolts of how do you navigate a situation like that. And the other part is how do you gain confidence to navigate that as you go through? Because obviously coming into it right from the get-go, from the start, you're not going to have that confidence. So you're an alumni of the program, and you're also a facilitator. So talk to me about those two parts.
I guess like as an alumni, you kind of experience more of a leadership role as well as like with the facilitator role. It's more about taking the lead on activities and trying to guide conversation to kind of reach a certain point of explaining a new concept or idea to hopefully hit like a breakthrough moment.
Okay. And then what about the confidence part? Is there anything specific in your work as a facilitator where you actually lock in on what it takes to become more confident in navigating the process?
Directly, no. But indirectly, a lot actually. Some things about confidence is that confidence can help clear a storm. If you are unsure or if you show doubt, then
great idea.
Your audience, your consumers, your youth will feel that doubt. So if you stay steady and you stay strong, then everything will smoothly flow together, even if it's like a storm in the background.
Right. So Phoenix, do you recall any moments of all of those events that you described a second ago where you felt what David is talking about, where there was a moment where you just knew you had to grab onto that confidence and move your way through it?
Well, personally, I like to plan what I say before I get there, but I have a nervousness when I find approaching a situation. Like I feel kind of nervous right now, but it's basically just knowing what you're going to say or knowing what is true to your heart that you want to let other people know and just getting it out.
Have there been any moments where you've been in a testimony situation or in a hearing of some kind where you felt like the moment had become a bit of a storm like David is describing? Like the voices were getting loud and the emotions were getting heated?
Yeah, well, personally, I've never testified in person. I always write indiscreetly for my testimony, but I do know that feeling, and it's just finding a way to clear the storm and find the epicenter of what it is that is true to you.
So Phoenix, we here in the state of Hawaii, you know that one of the things that we've been talking about a lot over the last few years is student voice. And I'm super amazed by the energy behind this conversation. And Ted Dintersmith, who's the author of the book What School Could Be, which inspired this podcast, What School Could Be in Hawaii, has identified Hawaii as one of the places where student voice is really, really starting to take hold. So I think for a lot of people who might be listening locally or nationally or even globally, they're not quite sure what student voice is. What does it mean to you?
Student voice is basically just an opinion that the student has on an issue. It can be in school, it can be outside of school, it can be something that they feel is important and are readily prepared to actively go out in the community or to whoever they need to address and share their voice.
And can you remember or can you think of a specific moment where you realized that your voice was present and was being accounted for by the people that you were with at the time?
Well, in so many instances, I've come to find that adults really appreciate when children share their opinions with them about education. Like at the board meeting I mentioned at Nunakuli Public Library, after I read past the bullet points in my head and set out what I was trying to say, there was a pretty big applause, and a lot of people came afterwards to say, wow, I'm so glad that we had someone we're the Board of Educators and we actually had a student there to share their testimony, because everyone else was, past 18 and maybe the working force of the school system.
Mm-hmm. What was the issue that you were testifying about that day at Nunakuli Public Library?
Oh, that day I was just saying what it's like to be a homeschooler in Hawaii and how it is to receive education and to give it back in the community, and my partnership with my inclusion with WAVE and the things they've done for me.
And what is it like to be a homeschooler in Hawaii?
Being a homeschooler in Hawaii, you learn a lot of things in a way that a lot of people call unorthodox, where maybe you're not getting credited for it, but the knowledge is still valuable. Mm-hmm. You go out and you find places in your community, like you can just go down to the beach in Makaha and you'll find people with kupu, or you can make a pohaku, a rock to pound poi, or I'm in case scholars for college-minded students and youth. And in the Community Learning Center, you can learn a lot about your culture. There's different ways that you can receive knowledge, and as a homeschooler, you just have a lot of freedom to go out there and find it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that as a homeschooler, you don't have one teacher, you have many?
Yes, as a homeschooler, I feel like everyone in the world is my teacher. If you have knowledge that you can impart on me, I will readily receive it.
It's so interesting because this is what we're talking about in Hawaii right now, is how do we break out of the mold of this is my teacher, as if that's the only person, and then how do we start looking throughout the community for people who can help guide, mentor, coach, facilitate, support us if you consider yourself that kind of learner. That's super interesting. So David, what's been your journey in terms of finding your voice?
In terms of finding my voice, I guess to take a look at the beginning, you couldn't really call it a passion point. At the beginning, it was a pain point. It was aimed towards the education system. That was what I was mostly concerned about, because I saw all these opportunities out in the world, but I didn't see them being implemented in the areas around me. I didn't see these breakthrough project-based learning or place-based learning, or I didn't directly see it with my own eyes. But after I got involved with the scene and I made efforts to find people who do stuff with that, find connections, build on those connections, it really changed not only my way of thinking, but the way I saw the world. Mm-hmm. Just being able to find different opportunities that move towards a better education system and really kind of break the mold of what the standard can be.
Mm-hmm. So over the course of this podcast series, David, 12 formal episodes. I'm not sure what number this will be, but already there have been multiple on the road episodes. Mm-hmm. They've all been with adults, adult leaders, adult educators. Mm-hmm. This is the first time that I'm getting a chance to talk to students. I would love for you to give your perspective on what defines project-based learning from a student's perspective.
Might have to take a second for that.
That's okay. And I'm actually thinking, David, that maybe the pathway to that response is through your experience with Nalukai Academy. That's a way for you to explain it. So you and I first met while you were in the middle of Nalukai Academy, which is a product-based, place-based, culture-based program here in Hawaii during the summer. So through the lens of Nalukai Academy, what's your definition of project-based learning?
Through the lens of...
what were you working on?
I was working on a startup that I created with a team of 3 other people. And what we did was we wanted to create a platform where educators and mentors could connect to create different projects for their students, create meaningful connections, and build on kind of like a partnership where you get to work together to create something that not only increases engagement, but also aids in teacher and student burnout.
Wow, that is an astonishingly layered project that you were working on. Because in addition to working on a project, you were also working on figuring out how do educators become more aware of what projects are and how do they work together, or how do they get support when you're going through it. And so that process of project-based learning has many angles to it, many facets to it. And so talk to me about that. What was that like?
Different angles of project-based learning?
Yeah.
I guess project-based learning is really, really broad. It could mean many things because there are so many different ways of looking at one thing, one object, one idea, one concept. From my perspective, I've always seen project-based learning as literally just having a project, having a goal, having a way to find out how to reach that goal, and having an end result. But my perspective has shifted a little to kind of value something like product or place-based learning, where there's an emphasis on where you come from, and those ideas influence how you approach the situation, how you approach the problem, how you even define what the problem is.
Sounds like you were building some soul, some spirit back into the project itself. Like you can have a very sort of, here's the product, there's a MacBook sitting right in front of me, but in the process, it sounds like you tapped into spirit, into soul, working together as a group. So I want to shift a little bit now, Phoenix, about what makes education special in Hawaii. We've already sort of touched on it a little bit, especially in terms of where you're coming from, and how learning is perpetuated in our culture. So what makes education in Hawaii unique?
Education in Hawaii is unique because, like I said earlier, Hawaii itself is unique. There's so many different cultures and a diversity of where you come from, and is perpetuated in our culture because, well, since we're in Hawaii, when you look in the Hawaiian culture, STEM roots back so very far. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And when you go out and you find, maybe you go to the lo'i or you take up navigating, you see the science of it come out, and you just learn piece by piece because culture is really tethered and the history is really tethered to our education process.
So STEM, which seems to many people like a brand new concept, is not brand new at all.
No, it's not.
It's got ancient roots.
It is ancient all over the world, really, beyond just outside of Hawaii. And that's what connects us globally. It's like if you just look into your culture, no matter where you are, any ancient culture incorporates STEM, which I found amazing.
And David, what is your sense of the educational uniqueness all around us here in Hawaii?
In the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned that sustainability and balance is a big thing, and I'm going to stick with that because everything that we do is done with the idea to keep moving forward, to perpetuate it, to make sure that we don't deplete our resources. And that doesn't just have to be environmental resources or physical resources. That can also be things like human capital or economic resources. There are so many different facets of sustainability. It doesn't have to just be the land, aina.
And in your experience with Nalukai and the other pitches, the other projects that were being worked on by other students and other student teams, did you see that coming, to the surface? That all of these unique approaches to things?
When I think about it and I think back on it, I definitely see little like nuggets or roots, or even some of them almost centered entirely around the idea of sustainability. All of them had sustainable business models where it was sustainable economically. This is something that we touched on, just making sure that you can continue to grow monetarily so that you can expand and scale as business, but also making sure that doesn't interfere with the land you're connected to, making sure you don't deplete resources, and also staying true to the root problem that you're trying to solve.
So Phoenix, what I'm hearing from David is that these pitches that they were making, these businesses, these ideas, came from a place of sustainability.
Yes.
Like you got to start from. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Before I answer, I actually went to Nalukai too, but I went to Nalukai Waimea, which is why I didn't
You
meet
did?
you.
Oh wow, this is fantastic! I've got two Nalukai people. Okay, great. So you were in the previous. You actually did it at Waimea. Was it Waimea this summer or was it the previous year?
Waimea this summer.
This summer. What was the idea? Wait, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm all excited now. Like, Nalukai times 2. What is your sense of that idea that David just talked about, where you start from a place of sustainability?
Yeah, I saw that a lot of my peers, like David had said, or a few of them, they were invested in sustainability of the Aina and just knowing that things don't get lost in the course of our modern lives. Like, there are a few teams that were trying to preserve just the names, the Hawaiian names of things in the forest or animals, and just making sure that if you're curious, you have like an app that you could go to, like a lot of things do for multilingualism, but directly for the Hawaiian culture or just scientifically for plants and animals in Hawaii. And I feel like education really is tied to sustainability because it comes back to balance of the individual student. If you don't have any balance in yourself, what is your waking life?
And so since you attended Nalukai Academy as well, what's your definition of project-based learning for all of these people who might be listening to this podcast?
Well, like David said, project-based learning is being invested in the project and learning from the outcomes that come while you're working on it. Like there were a lot of things that arised in the teams at Nalukai where we would be working on a project and then we'd be trying to find solutions, and then we'd find them just by searching for them and by trying to integrate it to our particular dilemma.
And what was your team working on?
My team was working on a student mentor sort of agency where if you wanted to pursue a particular field, you would contact us and then we would hook you up with somebody in that field, and they would take you on like an intern onto some of their jobs, and you could learn from them. And then from there, once you gain all of the knowledge that you need, we would then connect you with a local business person in need of your services.
Wow, extraordinary. So it's like a bridge.
Yeah.
In effect. Can you give me do you recall a specific example of where a particular business could be one of those connections?
Yeah. Our original idea was that if you're interested in film, we would hook you up with a filmmaker and you could go on set with them and learn audio and recording, and then once you have knowledge, we would take you to a local business manager or someone in need of video service to advertise their company.
Wow, that's awesome. So I can share a quick story with you. I'm working on my second documentary film, and because when Ted Dintersmith came to Hawaii in May of 2016 at the end of his year-long tour after he debuted the film Most Likely to Succeed, one of the places that I knew I had to take him was Waianae Sea Rider Digital. So we went there and we spent part of a day there, and Ted walked away kind of with his hands up in the air saying, "I've never seen anything like this throughout the entire United States." As a result of that, long story short, I partnered with Sea Rider to help make this documentary, and we're looking at innovation and education, and we're a year and a half into that project, and we're getting very close to a draft of the film at this point. So I love the idea that you're describing here of this bridge, that I got bridged because of TED to the Sea Rider program, but in what other ways could that happen? And how could we expand learning for kids to get them outside of the classroom?
Oh yeah, just like I said earlier, I feel like the individual student needs to follow their passion. And just, if you have a passion, go out and find for ways that you can participate in it. And there, lots of bridges will open for you, and lots of connections where you can meet people, like how I met the Wave Gang, and then I've been introduced to so many opportunities to share my voice.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And David, I have to talk about your time at Education Incubator. Since that's what you're involved in right now, you're actually an intern
Yes.
with the program. What is Education Incubator?
Education Incubator is a local nonprofit created around changing how and when kids learn, because you shouldn't have to wait to be important or to do something important or to make change.
And what's the process? Like, what is Education Incubator's process of making that happen?
A lot of times they do different trainings, they do partnerships with schools and organizations to work with youth directly in kind of facilitating the process of an idea and pursuing it.
And what's your specific role as an intern with the program?
As an intern, I've been kind of split between a couple of different kind of like tasks. One side is like a project management kind of side. I'm taking on some social media responsibilities, creating like a marketing plan, researching that, and then just like brainstorming between all the members. And then another side is being more involved with the trainings, working with the youth, making sure that I can help facilitate and just take on any challenge that comes their way.
And I understand that you're already a graduate of high school, so you're in what we call quote unquote a gap year. And so this is helping you to understand where you might go, where the canoe takes you. And that's happening right now, right?
Yes, it's always happening like when I least expect it. Like, I guess thinking back, I've always took a step forward when I had no idea what was going on. Like, for example, before I even graduated, like a month before I graduated, I was still completely unsure of where I would end up in the months following after. I had no idea. But then one day, I was in an elevator, and then right as I pressed the door, Miki Tomita from Education Incubator came in, and then we kind of like met up again. And then she asked me like how I was doing, what was I doing over the summer, and she invited me to the it was a partnership of Education Incubator and Sultan Ventures to create a business accelerator.
And that conversation led to your internship with Education Incubator. And so clearly the gods were looking after you in that moment, right? Because if she hadn't been in the elevator, if the door hadn't opened in that way, yeah. And I just think, Phoenix, about the ways in your Nalakai experience that you were actually trying to not wait for the gods to make it happen, to actually make it happen purposefully, right?
Yeah.
That's what you guys were working on. Yeah, that's super interesting. So as we come down to the end of this part of the podcast, in a minute, I'm going to be talking to David Miyashiro, who's the Executive Director of Hawai'i Kids CAN. I want to ask you a couple more questions. So give me your sense or what kind of advice do you have for youth who are looking for unique educational experiences? Phoenix, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, as a homeschooler, unique educational experience happens to me outside of the classroom. I do learn a lot online, like on edX courses, on main subject matter, but if you go outside of the classroom, like I said, you can go to the beach, you find kupu, you can just go out into the community, you can, if you want to make film, I like to make film, you can find Hawaii women in filmmaking, and you learn different ways based on your passion. And yeah.
Hawaii Women in Filmmaking is an extraordinary program.
Yeah.
And you've been a part of that?
Yeah, I've been one of their alumni for the past 3-ish years, I think.
Have you worked on a film with them?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. They took me on as an intern for season 2 of Real Vahine of Hawaii. And that was so awesome. I got to meet a lot of the famous women in the film industry in Hawaii. I think they're famous. You kind of know them if you're a filmmaker, and I got to learn from their experience and work with them and learn sound from them. Hawaii Women in Filmmaking has really been an amazing experience for me.
That's fantastic. And David, for you, what's your sense of advice, or your advice that you might give to youth, quote unquote, who are looking for unique educational experiences?
2 bits of advice. I feel like 2 of the most important things to carry is that 1, always surround yourself with the type of people you want to become. And 2, always say yes when you can. You will only close a door by saying no, but you will open an infinite amount of doors by saying yes.
Right. Wow, that's super inspiring. I've been actually, for me personally, I've been trying to figure out how to say no once in a while.
Right, that's also important.
Yes.
To keep that balance.
Right. But yes has been an important part of the last 3 years. If I hadn't said yes to a friend that I met at a local store here in town, this podcast wouldn't exist, because I said yes to him and he said yes to me. We decided to work on this together. So I honor that idea of saying yes to things. So I want to blend 2 questions together here at the end. One of them is, in a single word, what would you describe to be the most crucial factor for creating an ideal education? And that's a big thought, is an ideal education. But I also want to blend it with a question that I try to ask everybody that I'm inviting onto this show. It's a question built into the title of Ted's book, What School Could Be. So I turn it around and turn it into a question. So what could school be? So putting those 2 together, Phoenix, like what could school be, and what is that one word that might inspire people to think about that ideal education, or policymakers that you might be trying to influence?
I think that the ideal education for any student is based around, like David said, the person they want to become and their passions, where you can actively pursue what you dream to see yourself in 10 years. If you love filmmaking, there's a filmmaking organization in your school. If you love art, you go out and make art. And the same for anything that you want to pursue. And for the one word, I would have to say inner peace, because I feel like balance is very important for the individual. If you don't have balance in your mental, emotional well-being, your physical health, or your intellectual, academic stimulation, or connectivity to community, those are 4 things I believe are key to balance in the student's life. Then, because each of them depend on each other, and they're at their peak optimal performance, you're better for success.
So Phoenix, just for a second here, I want to do a little sort of role play or a simulation. Sorry, curveball coming at you, right? Let's go back to Nanakuli Public Library, and let's say that your formal testimony is over. And I've been listening to what you're saying here, and I have a really urgent question to ask you, which is, as a board member, I'm now a board member, and I'm asking you this question during your, after your testimony, your formal testimony. Like, how does the education community and educators and education leaders, how do they find out what you want to do, what you care about, what you might be passionate about, what you might be interested in? How do we go about doing that?
Oh yeah, well, the best way is to just ask, to go up to the students and ask, or to look at them and see what they like to do. Or maybe the students come up to you and they tell you, I want to do this. I think it'd be great if the school incorporated this. And maybe you just go around and you find other ways or other schools that are contributing to what students want, and you follow after them.
It seems like, though, that we're always pressed for time. We never have enough time to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, the days get busy and hectic like they usually do, and sometimes students feel bashful or shy and they don't really want to go up and directly ask the head person of their school, and maybe the head person of their school is too busy to come up to them. So it's just finding the way to bridge that gap. Like one thing at Nelukai that I remember they told us a lot was that if you want something, don't be ashamed to go out and ask for it and keep asking what you want for in life. Like they brought in a lot of amazing individuals like yourself, and they'd be like, if you see him sitting alone at lunch, you go up to him and you ask him. That's what we're trying to teach you here at Nelukai.
Right. And it seems like you're also reflecting on parents as well, and what parenting is teaching kids to ask, to advocate for themselves. If you're interested in something, go tell somebody that you're interested in something. That's very cool. So David, same question. It's kind of blending together. What could school be?
Right.
And also, what's that one word or a couple of words that kind of pull it all together in terms of an ideal education?
I guess like what could schools be? Schools could be a place where failure is not an F. Failure is not a failing grade. Failure is a frequent attempt in learning. And I feel like to get to a place where you can create persistence, you can create creativity, you can engineer that process of thinking is where you introduce choice and you also supplement it with structure. Because choice, without any restraint, is chaos. But structure in and of itself is just that, it's structure. It creates a factory line. When you add them together, you create something that's really beautiful, where students can really become learners again, and then they can take their education to their hands and have the guidance to move in the direction that is beneficial to them, but also do something that is meaningful to them.
So same situation, we're at Nanakuli Public Library and I'm the board member, and you're sitting next to Phoenix and you guys have been testifying. Right. This business of choice, like how do we find out, or actually different question, how do we redesign the day so that choice is actually possible for students? How do we do that?
I guess it starts with looking at different perspectives, different education models, different ways to convey choice or to give choice back. One of them could be project-based learning, which is a really nice segue. Project-based learning, there's not a lot you can do to take away from what you do for a project. If you just keep it, you can guide a project, but you can't put chains on it.
Right. Right. And Phoenix, David seems to be echoing the same thing that you were saying a minute ago, which is if you want more choice, you've got to ask for it. And so you guys going forward are going to be advocating for these ideas as you go forward, and you're going to be doing it under in the construct of Hawai'i Kids CAN, in the construct of WAVE and this program going forward. So I feel very honored to have had this conversation with you today. This is the first time that we've talked to students on this podcast, and I appreciate that you guys have taken the time to prepare for this conversation and to work with me on these questions. So everyone, we're going to take a short break and come back with David Miyashiro, the Executive Director of Hawai'i Kids CAN. So stay with us.
If you want to make your own podcast but feel intimidated by the tech barriers, then you might need Alitu. Alitu is a web app that lets you create and publish great sounding podcast episodes. It takes care of the complicated stuff, leaving you free to concentrate on what you do best, talking about your passion. Alitu, the podcast maker app, find it at alitu.com. That's ALITU.com.
Hi, I'm Tyler Kern from Market Scale. We're excited at the arrival of a new podcast series out of Hawaii titled What School Could Be in Hawaii. Market Scale is thrilled to be partnering with Josh Rappoon on this project and can't wait to hear the insight and thought leadership he brings to EdTech. If you're enjoying this podcast, you can hear it and others over at marketscale.com. You click on Industries at the top of the page and then scroll down to EdTech. Hope to see you there.
Hey everybody, we're back. This is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, another on the road edition. We're back with David Miyashiro, who is the Executive Director of Hawai'i Kids CAN. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Your students that I spoke to a few minutes ago, wow, outstanding thinkers. I'm feeling very hopeful about the future.
Talk about a really tough act to follow, right? I'll do my best.
Awesome. So David, tell us about the how you started Hawai'i Kids CAN, why, and what is its mission and vision?
Yeah, so, I'm actually a teacher at heart. That's how I got into all of this in the first place, as a special education teacher at Wahio Middle School. So for me, as a teacher at that time, teaching special education, my second year of teaching was when Furlough Friday started. So I remember that being a pivotal moment for me, where I realized, a lot of teachers, you just want to keep your head down and not get involved in politics and not get involved in policy. But whether or not you want to do that, it'll find you, right? And so,
for people who are listening outside of Hawaii, what was Furlough Friday?
So essentially, it was a budget showdown, which resulted in 17 days of the school year getting cut. So, but those are furloughs, so you're barred from coming into work. So even if you wanted to open up the school just to have a safe place for kids to come and hang out, totally not allowed.
So you brought Hawai'i Kids CAN into being and you stood it up. What was that process like?
Yeah, so after I kind of went through that Furlough Friday experience, I ended up being professional staffer for Senator Mazie Hirono in Washington, D.C., doing some political campaign work before coming back home. And so Hawai'i Kids CAN was really what I saw as a merging of those two experiences in those two worlds, where, you're trying to look at these big problems and big challenges from the perspective of an educator and as somebody who interacts with students all the time. But you're bringing kind of the knowledge of this political system, right, and all the factors that make things sticky and complicated in the first place. And so Hawai'i Kids CAN really was my attempt to bring together those worlds, empower students and community members to get involved in policy and advocacy, but at the same time stay grounded in what's actually happening on campuses and what students actually want.
And how did you go about recruiting students to be a part of Hawai'i Kids CAN in the beginning?
Yeah, so I think you had mentioned earlier on, we started as a really small kind of program within a program at Farrington High School. But I think the challenge I was trying to solve for was what I saw as a political staffer was that in a lot of ways, the traditional political system and the traditional education system are very similar. Kind of very much in the same design that it's had for decades. And, in that design, the community and the voters are really only seen as that, as voters. When you need the vote, you'll see candidates out there, you'll see people knocking on doors and getting involved. But in the in-between, it didn't really feel like people were asking the right questions of what does the community want, what do they need? And so for me, WAVE was a way to think about when we ask questions like, why does Hawaii have one of the lowest voter participation rates in the country? You can't just kind of scramble at the end and try to get students involved and get young people involved when they're old enough to vote. You have to build a culture of participation and a culture of engagement and trust and empowerment. And if you can do that, you can start to shift our broader landscape with how young people feel engaged and how they feel about being part of that system.
And what were some of the early challenges in terms of getting people to think outside that box, that it wasn't just going to be a rally that you might attend or a particular event of some sort, but that you're actually going to be doing this over the course of a period of time, and that you're learning a bunch of skills and habits and dispositions around policy and advocacy? What were some of those early challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that when I had started off, somebody had shared with me that the empowerment and mobilization are not the same thing. You can mobilize people kind of as bodies, and you can take kids to the Capitol and put cute shirts on them, but that's different than building a relationship between that student and the political system and their representatives, so that they're actually coming to the table as a partner and a constituent, right? And that takes time. It takes authentic, vulnerable learning, and really being able to build that trust with those students so that they can find those voices within themselves And so it takes time, and I think that's where we've been so fortunate to work with students like David and Phoenix and get to know them really over the course of years and see them grow as people and really see them blossom and share their voice.
And how have you found the legislators? What are the legislative reactions to having students not there in the traditional way, just there holding a sign or something like that, but actually they're very aware of what the policy implications of whatever they're working on are and advocating for it? What's that been like?
Yeah, so for our first session back in 2018, our big focus was on more funding for computer science education. We did a kind of a short report called the State of Computer Science Education in Hawaii 2018. We found that still half of high schools didn't even offer some kind of basic computer science course. And yet we see that automation and global forces are changing our economy, our global economy, so rapidly that it kind of blew my mind that still half of our schools, students didn't have access to those courses, and they couldn't speak the language of code and some of these critical things that are going to be necessary for students to know growing up. So we did is we worked with a teacher at James Campbell High School to take a group of his students down to the Capitol during their spring break. They could be at the beach, they could be out with friends, but they chose to come down to the Capitol and spend all day there meeting with legislators and sharing why they thought computer science education was a critical thing that all students should have access to. And what was so fascinating was that the students are incredibly perceptive. We would talk to them after each visit, and they would share their feelings for that particular member. And they can tell when a legislator is really listening to them and when they're not. And they notice who are those legislators who are writing down notes, who are asking good questions, right? Who cared about the projects that they were doing in their community. And I thought that was just so incredible to see those kids, even at that 15, 16 age range, to have this social intelligence to pick up on all of these cues that adults, if you're a professional lobbyist, you would see. But I think a lot of, unfortunately, our traditional education system, just like our traditional political system, when you think about kids getting involved in things like advocacy or like legislation, how do we set up a model or a mock legislature, right? Or a model UN? And those can be great programs, but gosh, they can get out there and do the real thing.
Right.
If I want to learn how to play basketball, I don't want to give, a book on, this is how you dribble. Just get out there, try things out, fail. It's okay. But that's where the real learning happens, I think.
I had my own issues with sort of the mock UN or the mock political or any of those processes where you were sort of going through a simulation. I recall back when I was teaching at La Pietra, Hawaii School for Girls, we put Abraham Lincoln on trial for revoking habeas corpus during the Civil War. And I had a friend who was a circuit court judge, and he actually heard the case in his courtroom. So my students came down and tried it in his courtroom, and it was so special. He actually rendered a verdict instead of saying to everybody, well, your side was great and your side was great. He actually came out and rendered a verdict. And I just remember how real it felt for all of us in the room. So that kind of policy work that you're talking about, you really get real when you're doing it. Question about preparation for the students prior to a moment like that. What is that preparation like? What do you and your team do to prepare kids? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so the WAVE program actually is a full school year long curriculum where you're looking at the centers of power that exist in our community. So we always start them with really just advocacy. To me is a way of thinking. So we start them with something like a simple scenario where, imagine a kid in your neighborhood is riding a bike home from school and they get hit by a car. What do you do next? Doesn't matter. You don't need to know statutes. You don't need to know all of the mumbo jumbo that I think for whatever reason in civic education, we focus on the process really quickly, right? Here's the electoral college. Here's, how a bill becomes a law. But focus on the action, right? And the thing that happened that galvanized the community and be able to build out ideas around that, right? And there's no right or wrong answer. Advocacy, lobbying, it's all much more art than science. And so, for each kid, it might be something different. You have kids who naturally gravitate to kind of being in the spotlight, and they don't mind, standing on a wall with a megaphone, if that's what it takes. Right. But you have other kids who are introverts, and they want to help out by coming up with really creative campaign slogans, or they have a skill, or they have talents with graphic design, and they can create those flyers. And so our advocacy curriculum shows that there's no one size fits all. There's no magic silver bullet for making change. It's really understanding what is the best fit for you, creating a plan, and then executing on that plan.
A lot of collaboration goes into the whole process. And everybody finds what their niche is, what their role is as they go through it. So David, I know that this cohort that you've got going right now is the first time that you've had a statewide cohort. So that feels a little different to me, just thinking about how that would work. So how is that different?
Yeah, so this is our first time trying a blended model where for Neighbor Island students, we're able to support them through Zoom video conferencing and through Google Docs. Again, simple products, nothing really fancy, but giving them a chance to come together on a regular basis, to talk story, see what they're working on, and then trying to pair them up with real opportunities to fly them out and get involved. So we saw that happen recently with the Children and Youth Summit. So we were able to leverage some of the funding through that summit to fly students out from several different islands so they could participate in that day as well, meet their counterparts, and really get to build their skills in person too. So we're continuing to iterate. It's a little bit of a pilot for us this year to see how smooth it is. But it really started because I met a student. It was at the Hawaii STEM conference, which is a great conference put on by STEMworks. And I met this awesome student from Molokai High School. And we had never done Neighbor Island work with students before, but I was just so blown away by her that, Aisha Heredia, who's our, kind of runs all of our student programs, we had a discussion. And it was basically, tell me why we can't do this, because I really think this young person is important and we need to figure it out. And I think that's, if our education system can think like that, right? If we can model that for the education system, I think we'll find that a lot of kids have those assets as well.
That's very cool. So David, I want to end this particular segment of this podcast by asking you about our Department of Education 2030 Promise Plan. And it's just a very simple question. If you were providing input and you were wanting to advocate for a particular set of promises that we might make to our kids, what would those promises be?
Yeah, I think, and we've been lucky to work as a partner with the Department of Education to host a series of community focus groups, in addition with some other partners, including Elemental Accelerator, Teach for America Hawaii, Hope Street Group, to provide that forum for community members to actually share, right? I may have opinions, but I think it's more important that the parents, the students, the teachers, even business leaders can share their thoughts as well. But I think for me, given that this is a 10-year plan, it's going to be really important that we build in, kind of as David was saying, some structure so that schools aren't kind of scrambling around, but also freedom and flexibility. 10 years is an incredibly long time in education, right? If you think about where our world was in 2009, and educationally, all the things that have happened since then, really the iPod even itself hasn't been around that long. Right. Things will change again in so many different ways. So again, do we have the supports for schools to adapt to that change, but also the flexibility to think big? And I encourage the department to look at education is more than schooling, right? As Phoenix was saying, education is all around us. The community represents our teachers and our learnings. So is there a way that we can be creative? And if a student spends a semester, working with a marine biologist, can they get science credit for that? Right? If there's a student who's a homeschooler and let's say they want to take a computer science course at a local high school, can they subscribe for just that course? If you think about the big changes that have happened economically and technologically, it's all about kind of this unbundling of services where folks can pick and choose what they want to get something that's truly personalized and flexible. And our system isn't quite there. It's not designed for that. It's designed, for kind of a 50s and 60s model. But if we can start to shift it and think about school in this kind of unschool, unbundled way, where the community is our classroom, I think we could do some really, really exciting things. So I'm excited, and I appreciate Dr. Kishimoto for creating this opportunity for community members to weigh in and provide feedback to the department.
I appreciate that the superintendent is asking for as much feedback as she has. It's been pretty remarkable. David, thank you for that challenge to our Department of Education and even to everybody in the state of Hawaii. And thank you for being a part of this episode today. David Miyashiro is the Executive Director of Hawai'i Kids CAN. And we are excited for what will happen for you guys as we go into the next legislative session. So good luck with that.
Thanks, Josh.